This is where I spend the majority of my day working, here at this large computer behind me, sometimes at my personal desk at that YouTube computer back there, sometimes working on this laser or my workbench behind me for different stuff. And I have to be careful with the grid here in my man cave, not to stress it out too much. I think it's only on a 15 amp, maybe up to 20 amp circuit within my breaker box, but I don't want to just plug too much stuff up at all times, and just, especially with the laser going, I got it going right now making business cards. So I have a solution for that. This is the Ecoflow River 3, and this is the newest addition to their River 3 line. They're slowly but surely expanding it out. You see the River 2 Pro back there behind it, but right here is the River 3. This is a little beast, a monster of a small power station. 245 watts. It's using LiFePO 4 batteries. It has two AC ports. One of them is the 3-prong, one's a 2-prong, which you can kind of see right there. It's very small. That's one thing I like about it. You may have saw my review about the River 2. This thing's even smaller, weighs even less, and it's even quieter at less than 30 decibels. It's running this entire desk as we speak. So this whole desk that I'm sitting at now is all plugged up into the River 3, and that allows for me to have it's basically an emergency power supply. If I were to lose power for in any extended amount of time, that's plugged up into the River 3, that thing automatically cuts on within 20 milliseconds and gets right to it. But let's shut everything down and let me show you the River 3 a little bit closer. All right, so we have the River 3 next to its predecessor, which is the River 2, and then next to some no-name Togo power that I got months ago here. So, all right, so here the River 3, this is a 245 watt output. The River 2 was a 256 watt output. The Togo power is a 330 watt output. So all of them have their pros and cons about each. Just as a disclosure, Ecoflow did send this out to me for free. This is not a sponsored video. Looking at these specs, this is a definite improvement from the old River 2. You can just first off look at the size difference. I'll put the specs up on the screen of the River 3. That's kind of boring. I really want to tell you about the functionality of Ecoflow's line of power stations and why I like them so freaking much. So it's louder than the new one. This one, it comes in about 30 decibels. This one's about 45 decibels. They weigh about the same, although this one is significantly smaller. I think that's pretty good. They improved the grab handle. They made the lip a little bit less pronounced. I kind of wish they would have kept the same lip like they did on the River 2. This just lets, if you put stuff on top of here that you don't want to roll off, it was a lot easier to keep those things from rolling off on that. But you know, it's still non-roll-off worthy. So that's one thing that you think about. So you might do that absentmindedly all the time when you're setting stuff down. So that's something to think about. So the only other differences is with this thing is this one here has a 5-year warranty and this one has a 2-year warranty. Why did they change the warranty? I am not sure, Ecoflow, why you did that, but I haven't had any issues, and I have some Ecoflows that I've had for more than 2 years and haven't had to warranty them at all. This one, both of them still have the same amount of outputs for the USB ports, 100 watt max for these. And then you got this one over here, which has all sorts of ports that turn off on their own. This thing is, this gets on my nerves. That's why I don't like budget power stations. This one often, the flap on this fell off months ago. It's a barrel port for input. It charges extremely slow. This thing takes nearly 2.5 hours to fully charge, where this one will charge in less than an hour. This one will charge in 1 hour. So those are kind of pros and cons. The River 3 now more conveniently fits in a backpack. You can buy the backpack specifically designed for the River 3, or you can also just Use a backpack that you may already have. Take this thing with you camping. Take this thing with you to fall events. First day of fall was just the other day. We got soccer incoming, track incoming, basketball games, football. Friday night lights are in full season. Keep your stuff, your items charged on the go. That's another thing I like about it. But you know how you can keep these things useful even when you're not actually on out in the woods or out to go? Use these things in your man caves. Use these things a part of your office. For instance, down here, this is the Ecoflow Delta 2. Excuse the look of everything down here, but this one down here is running my entire YouTube desk. Right now it's outputting 135 watts. It's running this whole desk, and it's also running the motor for the sit stand desk. So even if I wanted to, I could swap this out to run that entire desk with no issues whatsoever. This thing works in a lot of different scenarios very, very well. Some things it can't handle. Like my entire recording setup that I make YouTube videos with, this thing pumps out a ton of watts. That's why I'm using the River 2 Pro for that. Lots of components, lots of plugs. It can't handle stuff like that, but it does have a decent surge. All right, so one thing I wanted to show you guys is one of my favorite parts of the Ecoflow system is their app. It's really, really goated. This is why I like their product so much. You can see all my units right here, the Delta 2, the River 2 Pro, the River 2, and the River 3. For instance, if I were to look at the River 2, I have it plugged up right now. It's at 74%. It is currently outputting at 179 watts. It's keeping one of my monitors charged. It's inputting at 61 watts. So it will keep itself regulated as it can slowly but surely charges itself up. So I like just kind of like that flow and how it looks for that. So this is kind of what it looks like. It automatically pops up whenever you have new firmwares, and we'll do that later on. So you can do firmwares when you need to. But let's look at the River 3. So the River 3, I have it right here. And as you can see, completely wireless, and nothing's plugged up into it right now. There's no output going right now. But if I take this 30-watt plug that I have plugged up, and let's just say I plug up my cell phone in the AC port, then you're going to see as I plug that up, it's now displaying on the screen 13 watts. My phone is plugged up, 13 watts. But I can also unplug that, and I can plug it up directly into the USB-C port in the front and plug my camera up. And when you do that, you see it go 2 watts. It eventually will ramp itself up to around, I think my camera charges around 16 watts. So you see it goes up 12 watts or so, and it eventually will, whatever the peak wattage is for that device, it'll peak out at that level. Let's say I want to plug my phone from the USB-C port back into the AC port. I can do that. So now the AC port is going to be drawing power. And the thing I like about this is now the AC port is drawing 12 watts. Imagine you plug up an item that's a dumb item. The item doesn't automatically shut itself off when it's done charging. Anywhere in the world, I can cut off the AC port. That's what I like about this. Now I just cut off the power to the AC port. So that way, if I'm gone and I won't have anything draining my battery, and I can turn it back on if I want to. Same thing with the DC port. If I had this unit completely plugged up, then I will be able to see how much input it was going. It says 0 watts right now because it's not plugged up. I can turn the entire unit off. It says you won't be able to power it back on with the app. So that's one thing you have to think about. So you can turn that on with the app. One thing I would do instead of powering it off, you can kind of just let it power off on its own, or you can put it in a standby mode. So another thing is you can go in here and look for firmware updates yourself. So you saw my River 2, it popped up with a firmware update. You can also just go in here and look for firmware updates yourself. And one big thing I'm a big fan of is you control how fast the unit charges. So if I want to go in here right now, it's set to charge at 320 watts. That means that this thing will just fly charging as fast as it can. It will charge in about 50 minutes, 0 to 100% in about 50 minutes. But let's say I don't want to draw that much wattage from my wall. I can bring this down to charge at 140 watts. And I can also do silent charging if I wanted to as well. So if I'm in an area, maybe I have a CPAP machine, or maybe it's in a tent with me at nighttime and I don't want to hear the fans at all, you can do that. X boost mode is when the unit will allow itself to peak up to 600 watts. If you plug something up and that item, let's say you plug up a mini fridge that runs at 140 watts, but it peaks at 500 watts. That means you can plug it up into this device and it will peak at 500 watts and eventually bring itself down. You can turn that off if you don't want to have that on. And car input, you can change that as well. So lots of different settings inside the app. It's available for both Apple and the Google Play Store. So I think that's pretty good. You can set discharge limits. So say, for instance, you only want to charge this thing to 90%, which that might be something that you want to do for preserving the life of the battery. And also maybe, let's just say you don't want to drain this thing to 0%. Maybe you're not going to allow it to drain any further than 5%. And they say recommend 20%. So I will bump this up to, if I'm trying to keep this thing to live as long as possible, I will bump it up to 20%. And if I wanted to charge no more than, I would say 90%, they recommend 80%. But what this is doing is maximizing those batteries inside as long as possible, so that you just have full maximum usage out of it. Same app control for anything that you have going on. You see my River 2 is down, receiving some items as well, some wattage as well. This is at 100%, 175 watts, because we're literally recording right now. So it's running this monitor and it's running this camera. But I can turn that port off. If I did that, it would kill this recording. So we're not going to do that. But I can also turn on the USB-C port. So the higher you go in Ecoflow, the more features you get. You may notice on the River 3, I couldn't turn off the USB-C ports, but on this device I can. So everyone has different features, but I can't recommend it enough. I'm just a big fan of it. If you're trying to figure out what should be your first portable power station, I can't recommend the River 3 enough. My recommendation used to be heavily the River 2, but now they've released the River 3, and look at this. I mean, just the size difference alone is one major reason to go with it. I'm a big fan of it. Now, how does this compare with some of its competitors? This fits in the same place as the Blue Eddy, the AC2A, the Jackery 240 V2, the Anchor, I think the 521, and the Anchor C300. All of them have their pros and cons. One thing that some of those have that this one does not is you can't charge this one with the USB-C port. Some of the competitors I just rattled off, if you don't have the AC plug, which the AC plug for this plugs up over here on the side, if you're missing that plug, you only can charge this with the DC port or with a solar charger. So being able to charge this with USB-C would be nice. However, I will say out of all those, this one is the quietest. This one has some of the fastest, other than the Blue Eddy and probably maybe the Jackery. This one has one of the fastest emergency power supply switches. If you have a CPAP machine plugged up to it, something that you could rely on. I'm a big fan of that. So I can easily say Togo Power, this is one of the ones where I suggest just don't go with a cheap setup, okay? Cheap setups do stuff like they'll give you the chargers on the top, which I actually kind of like the wireless charger on the top, but they do things like they put lights in the handles. With this is a very harsh light, and it drains the battery really quickly. It charges really slow. And if you try to use this at its max output, it has a horrible surge. So 346 watt hours or 330 watts. This thing, I don't think it can surge. Like most of the time, it may not surge anywhere near past that. So for this overall, it does have the battery type is 18650 batteries. I don't even know if those are LiFePO 4 batteries. So you really are paying for what you get what you pay for. So this one may have 21700 batteries or 18650 batteries in it. I don't know, but these are LiFePO 4, which have a much larger lifespan on them, versus just cheaping out with something that you cannot rely upon. So that's something that you want to think about as well. So if you're thinking about your first power station, don't spend a ton of money on anything. If you're not sure if you're going to like it, I would recommend that at a minimum, get a name brand. My heavy recommendations are always Anchor or Ecoflow. If you can't get Anchor or Ecoflow, the next best suggestion would be all powers, which I use all powers over here. I have an all powers. I think this is a 1,000 watt all powers unit, which is running my entire coffee mess. I mean, comment down below, would you get the Ecoflow River 3? I mean, it's a wee little baby. It literally could just go on my shoulder. Like, one thing I use this for also is I will take this in a bag if I'm going to be going an extended amount on one of my e-bikes or on my one wheel or something like that. So this thing can charge this e-bike pretty easily. It can charge my scooter very easily. Either one of my one wheels. I've shown my one wheels in the past. That's one of my one wheels on the wall. But if I'm going to be going a very long distance on one of those devices, I think my other one wheel's in the house, I will happily take the Ecoflow in a backpack. And let's say I'm going on a 40-mile trip, even longer than that, throw that thing in there and just allow it to be my backup. When I get to my destination, just because I can't plug up into their units, I can just use the Ecoflow, get a charge on one of those devices and make my way back home. So comment down below, is this something that you would consider getting? I don't know the pricing of it. I'll leave the links in the description and I'll put the price on the screen, because last time I checked, this thing was like $169, and it came with a backpack, but that was below the MSRP. I think the MSRP on this thing is going to be 200 and something, but my belief is $1 per watt hour. This is 245 watts. This should be $245. If you're getting it at or below that price, you're getting a good deal. If you can get it 80 cents per watt hour, that's a good deal as well. But let me know if this is something that you would consider. If this is your first time stopping by, hit the subscribe button. I would love to have you a part of the battalion. It's the fall. Yes, I know I'm wearing a Grinch sweater. I can't wait for Christmas, okay? If this is not your first time stopping by, thank you once again for watching me run my grape. For everyone else, we'll speak soon.